Muse was one of the most iconic bands of the 2000s, and has a legacy in rock music that's still going strong today. They released high-charting hits, boundary-pushing anthems, and dystopian lyrics that have influenced millions of fans worldwide. Hip-hop replaced rock music as the go-to genre sometime during the mid-2000s, and with its increasing popularity, some rock bands struggled to keep up with the trends. Muse, on the other hand, still have a raving fanbase even today in 2020, but a lot of fans turned on them during the 2010s. Why? In this video, I'll explore the band's early rise to fame, as well as answering this question: what happened to Muse? Let's find out. Vocalist and guitarist Matthew Bellamy, bassist Chris Wolstenholme, and drummer Dominic Howard met each other while attending Teignmouth Community College in the early 90s. Teignmouth was, and still is, a small town located in the southwestern shores of the UK. A small, boring town according to the band members, a place where people often come to grow old. Now, back when these guys attended college, they all played in different bands. But at some point, Matt ended up auditioning for Dom's band and got the job.
And I had a band with a few of my mates, and we were just looking for another guitarist because that guy just, I guess, wasn't really into it or something like that. And I knew of Matt because he'd done a few school performances. It was a bit awkward because the first rehearsal, I think he turned up in one of those shell suits. Yeah, and I think the other guys were like, who the fuck's this guy? But then, played the guitar well.
The band was then called Carnage Mayhem, but the group decided to change the name to Gothic Plague. And when I hear these names, it sounds like they were about to start a death metal band or something. I mean, Carnage Mayhem, it definitely sounds like a band that would warm up for Cannibal Corpse or something. Now, Chris, who was in a different band and social circle at the time, was eventually asked to join as bassist, and he accepted the offer. But he wasn't too experienced with bass playing. In his previous band, Fixed Penalty, he was the drummer, but he was very open-minded and started taking bass lessons immediately. The trio probably realized that their name sounded too much like a black metal outfit, and changed the name to Rocket Baby Dolls. What a great name, right? Rocket Baby Dolls was a band dedicated to creating glam rock. In '94, they were fortunate enough to win a local Battle of the Bands contest, and the reason for winning was probably because they went apeshit on stage after finishing. They never thought they would win the competition, but after that event, they started realizing that maybe they had something special going on. So they moved away from Teignmouth and changed their band name once again and for the last time, and probably also for the better. Soon enough, they met with Dennis Smith, a family friend of theirs who happened to run a studio and label, Sawmill Studio and Taste Media Records. Dennis helped them pop out a couple of EPs, the Muse EP in '98 and the Muscle Museum EP in early '99. The latter EP got them attention from several music critics and media outlets. It reached number 3 in the indie singles charts in the UK, was featured on radio stations, and in NME. They even performed at the Emerging Artists stage at Woodstock '99. Muse was on a roll. They were touring a lot. Times were hectic, but luckily for them, the hard work would soon turn into massive payoff just around the corner. In '99, they released their debut album, Showbiz. Sadly, it wasn't welcomed with open arms by the public at large. It received mixed reviews, some people stating that they sounded too much like their older peers in Radiohead, that their music wasn't that clever, and that Matthew wrote pseudo-poetry. Many of their die-hard fans that were there to begin with thought the opposite though, some even stating that Muse was a far more energetic band than many of their contemporaries.
They get all these Radiohead comparisons, but where Radiohead are very much a kind of a stand and listen and nod, Muse are very much a jump up and down from the band, and I think that's where their big strength lies.
The album featured a sound that took inspiration from various genres like classical jazz, Latin, and world music, but the fundament of their music was built on the basics of rock and roll: guitars, bass, and drums. The blend of rock music with literally everything else was a formula they followed with later albums too. Now, John Leckie, their producer, chose to record parts of the album at Rack Studios in London, where bands like The Cure and Pavement had recorded albums in previous years. We don't know the reason why Leckie chose Rack Studios and their old-fashioned recording and mixing consoles to record Showbiz, but he definitely thought that the band members were serious, talented, and more than competent enough to create something great. Maybe that's why he chose such an old-fashioned and simplistic studio setting, because he wanted the guys to do their thing without making things too complicated.
This studio, John Leckie chose this place because of this desk, which is like a really old thing, which you don't really find anywhere anymore. It's like an old vintage desk, and it has a certain sound to it. And as you can see, like, everything here is pretty old. There's nothing like very modern here. There's no computers and things like that, so you know, it's all down to the bands to create the atmosphere.
Now, on another note, Leckie made sure to not make things boringly simple though. As studio sessions went on, he introduced the guys to creative and atypical ways of recording music too. Ironically enough, Matt was quite hesitant to using these methods to begin with, but gradually he started seeing the value in, for example, putting the mic underneath the table and in the mouth of the stuffed bear in the hallway. It produced a different sound and perhaps a more original sound.
And Matt said, oh, you know, you can't do things like that, you know. And I said, well, of course you can. This is what you do, you know. And he's meant to be the young rebel, you know. And I'm saying, no, let's put the microphone up here or something and see what it sounds like. So I think he got off on some of those crazy ideas and things.
While the band was touring extensively after the release of their debut album, they started making material for their next record. Origin of Symmetry was recorded between September 2000 and February of 2001, and was finally released in July that same year. This album definitely presented a more evolved band. It helped people see that they, in fact, were different from their contemporaries in Radiohead. But despite of helping them reach more potential fans, it wasn't the album that would rocket launch them to mainstream success. That happened with their third album, Absolution. This one featured their first top 10 hit single, Time Is Running Out, a single that caused a meteoric rise to fame for the band. But this was just a taste of what was about to come. Black Holes and Revelations from 2006 spawned 5 successful singles, and The Resistance, their 5th album from 2009, hit number 1 in 19 countries. But despite of all these amazing albums and great years of success, it was about to slow down. Their original and experimental sound and Bellamy's often dystopian and evocative lyrics throughout didn't hit the audience the same way anymore. The band was met with increased criticism from both outsiders and their fans at this point. It definitely started with the release of The Resistance, but became more evident with the next album. The Second Law was released in 2012, and although the previous albums had an ever-evolving sound, this one was a leap into a completely new territory. Some songs incorporated dubstep elements. Remember when dubstep was a thing back in like 2001 and 12? Well, Muse jumped on that short-lived trend too. A couple of songs also featured lead vocals from bassist Chris Wolstenholme, who'd never done lead vocals for the band in the past. And overall, their sound leaned more into electronic music. Sadly, as a result of this massive risk-taking, the album failed to gain the same acclaim as their previous albums.
And it's just... I'm pretty much feeling a light to decent 3.
And then we have Drones from 2015 and Simulation Theory, their latest effort, from 2018. The lowest rated albums from Muse, both getting a generally favorable score of 63 out of 100 from Metacritic. Personally, I'm a big fan of all their albums up until Second Law. Yes, I know that Second Law was very different, it's far from their greatest album, but they did have some amazing songs that went above and beyond. I'm talking about Animals and Panic Station. Man, those songs are just amazing. So what happened to Muse? Well, they are 3 extremely talented musicians that happened to have the audacity to follow their instincts and were lucky enough to generate a zeitgeist movement in the early 2000s. That's not something that happens every day. I think the appeal of Muse's music is wearing off these days. Hip-hop has and still is ruling the world in terms of being the most popular genre. And Muse managed to sort of catch on to that last wave of rock music that hit the mainstream media in the early or mid 2000s. With changing times, I think some artists become a little bit desperate to stay relatable. Maybe they're feeling this themselves at this point. Honestly, I don't know. I do believe that they have what it takes to create something epic again, if they just keep going though. So I still consider myself a big Muse fan, even though I didn't appreciate their last 2 albums. I think we'll just have to wait and see what happens for now. They've definitely got their own style and they still have a huge, consistent following of fans, so I don't think they're struggling in any way. Let me know what rock band, artist, or album you want me to talk about next down in the comments. I also want to inform you that I'm offering freelance animation and video editing services now. So if you want to create a cool video or presentation, something along the lines of what I'm creating here, then feel free to send me a mail to the address in the description below, and we can see if it's a good match. And that's it. Cheers. Bye.